All right, sophomores, welcome to class. I am joined by the Gerald White out of our Anishinaabe education room. Couple facts about Gerald you might not have known. He is a biology major. He graduated college with a limnology degree, which is what again, Gerald?
Study of fresh water.
Study of fresh water, which is pretty cool. Um, so, for those of you who looked on Schoology, what I'm going to do as quick as I can because we're limited on time is this week we are focused on different cultures contributing to science, to biology, and the Anishinaabe people that have been in our area for a long, long time have certainly had a lot of contributions and have a pretty extensive history of what they offer. So, without further ado, we are first of all, Gerald. Thank you for joining us. This is you're an awesome resource, and we're lucky to have you. First question I want to ask you is: in today's society, a lot of humans have the idea that we own nature or that humans are above nature and they're not part of the cycle. Can you talk about the traditional Anishinaabe views and the connection to the ecosystem? In other words, the traditional Anishinaabe teachings, do they say we are a part of the ecosystem, or do they say that we're above and we own the ecosystem?
The traditional teachings are based on some of our oral traditions, which say that man is the last one to come to this earth. And I believe that the wolf walked with the humans in our oral tradition stories, and the wolf and the bear told the humans about the medicines and the names of all the plants and all that. So our original perspective is that we are newcomers to this earth, and that we're not caretakers. We don't own it, but we are responsible for protecting it, and that includes the water, plants, and all the things that are in our biosphere. I guess we have a very strong connection to the earth because of our belief systems and our in our language. Um, Most of our language is based on verbs, animate and inanimate. When you look at the two terms of animate and inanimate, you come to realize that all the things that we look at on the earth usually have like a spirit. So if you look at our worldview, is that just about everything has a life spirit. And when you look at science, you dig deeper into science, we are all related that way, because most of the time when we say we are all related, people don't understand that concept. So when you look at our concept that we are all related, we haven't changed that perspective for millennia, of hundreds and thousands of years. The we are all related means that at some point we could have been some other being, some other plant, some other whatever, because we're all made up of molecules, right? Everybody is made up of molecules. So matter cannot be created or nor destroyed, right? So these are the kind of things that we think about when we look at the Anishinaabe belief system, is that we are all related in that respect. Even though we didn't use the terminology that science uses today, we still knew those things. Fire, air, all these things that we look at as animate things are very. You can't live without them. You can't live without being knowledgeable about these things on the earth. And if we are knowledgeable about the all the things that we live with on this earth, we have more respect for them. I was just out in the woods yesterday by Inger here, and they took a bunch of red pines out of the woods, but they forgot to take their trash out, and they just plowed out this road this fall, and there was like plastic water bottles, plastic sandwich wrappers, soft drink wrappers. I mean, not wrappers, but bottles. And I was thinking about that yesterday. It's like, so they're taking these resources out of the forest and leaving some of their junk there. It's like, how disrespectful can you be, you know, and be destructive to the environment that way? So I don't know that. I hope that answers that question, but really, it's a really long learning process for traditional knowledge to be passed on and understanding and be open-minded about things. We don't have dominion over the earth, period. We are part of the earth. We are subordinate to everything, supposedly. That's how we're supposed to believe.
Yeah, and I'd like to, for everyone watching this, I'd like to point out too that a lot of what you said is backed up by science. You said energy cannot be created or destroyed. That is straight out of Albert Einstein, I believe, who came up with that. Talking about everyone being related, there's DNA evidence to back that up. And my particular favorite was biosphere because that was their vocab word not too long ago, and everything living and non-living working together. So I'm actually going to kind of jump ahead to the next question just because you kind of led into it and talking about natural resources. So right now, people in society hear about natural resource plans. The traditional Anishinaabe ways would have, I imagine, they would have had to be very mindful of what resources they were using as far as animals in the area that they use for food or water or basically any resource. So was there a sort of natural resource plan? I can imagine being environmentally conscious has always been a strong value.
Well, respect is probably the best manager of any kind of anything, whether it's human relations, whether it's hunting, fishing, or gathering, or whatever religion. Respect comes first, and that's one of the basic things that we're taught as young people, and we've gotten away from that. A lot of our communities have gotten away from that to an extent that we are no longer living that lifestyle of respect. Because when I go to, for example, our wild rice is very important for us. If we didn't have wild rice a long time ago, we wouldn't have survived. Knowledge about how much things, I guess you could call it sustainability. People knew what was sustainable. How many deer could you take? How many woodland caribou could you take? How many moose? You can't overhunt. You can't overfish. You can't take more than you can use. And wasteful practices are detrimental to anything, actually. So when you look at the ideas of how we lived in this environment, if you overfish, you're not going to have fish. Simple as that. Same thing as overhunting. Overuse of anything on this earth is detrimental to our own survival. So when you look at water resources, for example, every day we're polluting the earth, and every day we use more and more plastic. I've started to use just stuff things in my pocket when I leave the grocery store. Of course, I pay for them first. But every place you go, there's like plastic. Everything is plastic, and that's from oil. Oil reserves are diminishing, but they think there's an oversupply, but really, there's not. There's oil was meant to stay in the ground, and it's very detrimental to our environment. So there's a lot of things to consider when you think about those kind of questions. So if you have any specific questions, just pass them on to Mr. Corbett's there. I could probably get a little more detailed in my explanations of what I mean about those things.
Yeah, and the assignment last week actually had to do with fossil fuels and producing carbon dioxide, and certainly talked about how it's a tricky situation because, of course, once you bring money into this situation, it's a whole different story. So they're a little bit familiar with that, but it's certainly an interesting topic. One other thing I'd like to point out too is that talk about how science, and a lot of people think that science was created one day to be put in a textbook and to be so the kids could study it in school. Particularly the Anishinaabe people of this area have been doing science for thousands of years, and relied on it. So a couple notes I've written down is finding food, using the resources, which Gerald just talked about a little bit. Even the changing of the seasons around here, as far as looking for different signs and lifestyles. So as far as the last question, as we have about 3.5 minutes left, I was wondering if you could just touch on how the traditional Anishinaabe did use science and kind of rely on science for everyday life.
Well, when you look at science, the word is very scary to a lot of people. You know, a lot of people say, "Well, I can't do science. I don't." But you live science every single day of the year. You look at science, and you look at air temperatures. You look at rainfall, snowfall, everything. Everything that isn't this biosphere again is science. You know, you can't live in a world without science, and maybe we should change that name from science to something else. No, I don't know. But when I grew up without electricity or running water, and we used well water for our primary drinking source, cooking and cleaning and that kind of thing. And we, you know, how to get the water out of a spring, for example. What my dad did was build a box and put it into the creek where the spring started, and the water filled the box, and then it would kind of like filter out the big particles of whatever, and you could drink it straight out of the spring too, but you couldn't get pails of water because it was kind of like gurgling out of the ground. So knowing that, that the microorganisms in there further on down the creek would probably contaminate and give you stomach problems. So knowing that you could boil it, that's science. I also grew up trapping animals for a living, and I was 14 years old when I bought my first car using money that I made from trapping muskrats. And yeah, so I was pretty knowledgeable about ecology, because my father and my grandfathers, we all trapped, and they all talked about how to walk in ice in early fall, for example, or how to be careful on a beaver house, because beavers, when they swim underwater, they leave air bubbles, and those warm air bubbles will kind of like melt that ice over a long winter, for example, so it'll be a little thinner there, a little mushier. So understanding those kind of things is very, very life-saving for people that lived on hunting, fishing, and gathering. Where do you go in the fall to get walleyes? Where do you go in the fall to get whitefish? Whitefish feed primarily on the bottom. On the bottom, they eat mollusks, the little snails and shells and that kind of thing. And walleyes, they eat little perch and other little walleyes. And where do they go in the fall? The shallow water, right? Sandy bottoms, that kind of thing. So those are the things that are, I guess you could call it, almost innate knowledge that's within you, that you know those kind of things if we grew up that way. It's something we didn't go out and say, this is why and how and all these other things. Just the way it was. Trapping beaver or trapping fox or hunting deer or woodland caribou or things like that.
One minute, Gerald.
Okay. So, just to finish up here, I think the most important thing to realize that everybody lives science every day.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself, or I couldn't have used better examples. I've been trying to get that point across, I think, all year, that we use science every day, and that was really well said. Thank you, Gerald. Appreciate you talking to our sophomores.